Chapter 11 The Three Giants in Yuhai Security Zone. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Guardians are all awakened ones beyond S level. Wei Linger nodded and continued, our Yuhai base now has 3 Guardians. The reason why the Jade Sea safe zone can have a place in the end of the world and attract survivors from the surrounding areas is due to these 3 Guardians. Mu Qiu secretly felt lucky. Fortunately, he did not blindly become arrogant and go against the base based on his increased strength. Otherwise, the 3 destruction level powers would be too much for even his evolved fire demon lord. What are the identities of these 3 guardians in the base? Mu Qiu was a little curious. Wei Linger was silent for a moment, with a rare gloomy look on her pretty face. The entire Yuhai base still has no clear leader. To be precise, it is not a dominant one. The base is now divided and controlled by 3 major forces. After the apocalypse, the bosses of the 3 forces jointly established the Yuhai safe zone, and each has destructive power in their hands. They are the real Earth Emperors of Yuhai. At the same time, in a building in the center of Yuhai security zone, this is a luxuriously decorated office with a level of magnificence that is rare even before the end of the world. Oh. So that elemental awakener has joined Wei Linger's team. In the office, a middle-aged man with a fat body and a big belly was sitting on a mink chair, and in front of him stood a man in a suit and leather shoes. If Mu Qiu were present, he would definitely recognize this person as the middle-aged man who had handed him his business card in the training ground with the intention of recruiting him. The man in the suit nodded. It seems that this awakened person was brought back from the ruins. Outside the city. Our people did not receive the news. The fat middle-aged man was half leaning on the backrest and said thoughtfully, if I remember correctly, this Wei Linger is Wei Ying's sister, right? Wei Ying is Xiao Hanyan's man, so Xiao Hanyan has another potential stock. The middle-aged man has a bloated figure, and even loose clothes cannot hide his fat belly, only a pair of eyes shone with shrewd light, and then he waved his hands freely and said. Forget it, at least I didn't fall into the hands of that madman Wang Depeng. Otherwise, wouldn't he be even more lawless in the future? After saying that, the middle-aged man stood up from the mink chair, walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of the building, and squinted his shrewd eyes to look out the window. The place seemed calm and peaceful, no different from before the apocalypse. The only difference was that there were very few pedestrians on the street, and most of them were in ragged clothes and walking in a hurry. The rich man's face showed a solemn look. I don't know how long this tranquility can last. Zhang Qingwei, one of the 3 leaders of Yuhai base, was a shrewd businessman before the apocalypse, and he was very wealthy. After the apocalypse broke out, he awakened the power of treasure hunting, and used this to organize his subordinates to collect a large amount of resources. He soon became the dominant force leader. But the most terrifying among the 3 is Wang Depeng, who is called Madman. Wei Linger's expression suddenly became a little strange, and she reminded Mu Qiu. If you meet Wang Depeng, it's best not to have too much contact with him. How do you say it? Mu Qiu asked. He didn't understand why Wei Linger had such a strange reaction when Wang Depeng was mentioned. Wei Linger looked around, suddenly stood up on tiptoes and whispered to Mu Qiu. Wang Depeng was originally an ignorant little gangster before the end of the world. When the end of the world came, he had some good luck and actually awakened his superpower. With his ruthless personality, he quickly gained a foothold in the apocalypse. Later, he gathered a group of gangsters around him. His strength also increased by leaps and bounds, and he soon became one of the 3 giants of Yuhai. The Ma Kuan who is against you today is Wang Depeng's subordinate. He is a cruel and crazy person. He is cruel in dealing with humans and zombies. He is also narrow-minded and will retaliate. In short, you must be careful about this person. Mu Qiu nodded. If Wang Depeng didn't cause trouble for him, he wouldn't do it for nothing. What about another one? But when it came to the last leader, Wei Linger's tone became obviously much lighter and she said happily. The last leader of the Yuhai safe zone is Sister Hanyan. Sister Hanyan came from a military family. After the apocalypse began, she led the surviving army soldiers to rescue the survivors. Later, she recruited and expanded her troops among the survivors. The reason why the soldiers at Yuhai base now have these comprehensive standard equipment is all thanks to Sister Hanyan's help. Mu Qiu understood. In other words, the three leaders each have different divisions of labor in the base and jointly establish a safe zone for survivors. Wei Linger nodded. Sister Hanyan organizes manpower and trains soldiers in the base. And the task of the awakened team like us is to explore the ruins and eliminate the heretics. The two of them walked and talked like this, and Mu Qiu soon discovered that the closer they got to the center of the Jade Sea safety zone, the more survivors there were on the roadside. Most of them were wearing shabby clothes, and some even set up tents with some rags on the spot. These tents are full of holes and potholes, and obviously cannot provide even the most basic shelter from wind and rain, but these people still live in them happily. It was almost time for dinner, and Mu Qiu saw a stall in front of him. A group of survivors had lined up in front of the stall, and their bowls were full of rice paste. Wei Linger explained, noticing Mu Qiu's gaze. These people are survivors who escaped from other urban areas. They have no place to live and can only sleep in the safe area. At this point, Wei Linger paused, and then continued, but at least, it's much safer here than in the resettlement area on the edge, isn't it? Mu Qiu didn't say anything, because when he saw these groups of humans, the brutal consciousness of the flame demon lord in his body began to stir again. Blood food, drink blood, eat flesh and blood raw, swallow. Swallow. Swallow them. The violent and bloody thoughts kept echoing in his mind, and he seemed to have seen the scene of blood and flesh splashing in front of him. A red light flashed in Mu Qiu's eyes, and he was trying his best to activate the tiger spell to suppress the hostility in his heart. Wei Linger saw him standing there in a daze, staring at the groups of refugees, with beads of sweat oozing from his forehead. She thought that Mu Qiu was moved by sympathy when he saw this scene. Chapter 12 The Big Boss Hidden in the Novice Village. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In order to ease the atmosphere, Wei Linger smiled and said, "Don't worry, maybe when you become a destructive level powerhouse in the future, you can let these survivors live a good life after eliminating the heretics around them." Mu Qiu had just recovered from her violent emotions, but she didn't expect that the evolved fire demon lord's consciousness was so powerful, and the tiger talisman could only barely suppress the dark side in his heart. After hearing Wei Linger's words of persuasion, Mu Qiu smiled and remained non-committal. "If I don't eat them, I'm deliberately being patient, right?" Wei Linger suddenly smiled. "Suddenly I feel like I am an NPC in Novice Village." Mu Qiu was stunned, then smiled and said, "So, I am a newbie who has just arrived in Novice Village. But I believe you have the potential to grow into a full-level boss." Wei Linger blinked at Mu Qiu and walked forward with Mu Qiu. Mu Qiu looked at Wei Linger's slender figure, and couldn't help but think of the berserk fire demon lord, and murmured, "I'm afraid that I am the final big boss." He didn't know that as his strength gradually increased, whether the power of a tiger charm alone could restrain the violent and bloodthirsty emotions in his body. If he cannot suppress the consciousness of the Fire Lord in his body and releases the Berserk Fire Lord, then the entire base will turn into a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Mu Qiu shook his head. He was a little unsure whether it was good or bad for him to stay in the human world. Soon, under the leadership of Wei Linger, Mu Qiu arrived in front of a row of villas in the wealthy area of Yuhai City before the apocalypse. Wei Linger approached a two-story villa, took out the key, opened the door and walked in. Mu Qiu was a little confused, but still followed in. The villa is a two-story building as a whole, with exquisite decoration inside, a high-ceiling foyer, and a wide floor-to-ceiling window on the second-floor balcony, which can overlook a lot in the distance. The overall decoration is not as luxurious as ordinary villas, but it is more elegant. Wei Linger took Mu Qiu for a brief walk around and suddenly said, "How is it? This house is pretty good, isn't it?" As soon as he finished speaking, just as Mu Qiu was confused about what he meant, Wei Linger threw the key in her hand to Mu Qiu. "Here, I'll give it to you." Mu Qiu was a little surprised this time. Although these properties are no longer valuable in the end of the world, this place is in a safe zone after all. Even if you look at the entire Yuhai base, it is located in the golden zone in the center. It is heavily guarded and is even more precious in the end of the world. He really didn't expect that Wei Linger would give it to him so easily. "Did you rob the house?" Wei Linger rolled her eyes at Mu Qiu and continued, "Don't think too much, this is a property I owned in Yuhai before the end of the world, and now I give it to you. Mu Qiu didn't expect that Wei Linger was a wealthy woman who was secretly wealthy. This property was very good in terms of location and layout. The price before the end of the world would have been 7 figures at least. Does anyone who joins your team receive this kind of treatment? Mu Qiu asked. What a beautiful thought. Wei Linger rolled her eyes. This is a reward for your good performance today. An elemental awakener is still worthy of my investment. Mu Qiu was once again glad that she rejected the invitation from other teams today. You must know that this eldest lady is a bit difficult to deal with. Cats with fried fur are generally vindictive. With that said, Wei Linger took out a cloth bag from her waist and handed it to Mu Qiu. Mu Qiu opened the bag and saw several bottle-sized white crystals inside, with a blue gem-like crystal at the bottom. Sensing Mu Qiu's confused look, Wei Linger explained, this is the energy crystal core obtained from the mutated zombie heretic. In addition to activating the supernatural energy in the body after practicing, the method for awakeners to advance can also be to improve their supernatural abilities by absorbing these energy crystal nuclei. It's just that relying on absorbing crystal nuclei to advance is ultimately an external force. The energy absorbed is too ineffective. Moreover, the output of crystal nuclei is still a matter of probability. The energy crystal nuclei themselves are also extremely precious. The cores produced by the lowest level zombies are white, and the color of the cores produced by higher level zombies will also change accordingly. Crystal cores can also be used as hard currency in the base, so you have to cherish them. Consider this a gift package for you as a newbie. How about it? I'm pretty competent as an NPC, right? After hearing Wei Linger's explanation, Mu Qiu couldn't help but appreciate this maintainer of order in the base. Although there are still many survivors in this huge base who are hungry, it is really not easy to establish such a system in just 2 years after the outbreak of the apocalypse. In the past few days, you can go to the training ground to practice your abilities. In 3 days, our team will conduct a collective mission. By then, you will have met the other members of the team. Wei Linger explained to Mu Qiu again, and then left the villa. Before leaving, Mu Qiu asked Wei Linger if she knew where the Daishiandi Entertainment Club was. He was still worried about where the system would check in next. Wei Linger looked at him with strange eyes and said, Entertainment Club. One look at Wei Linger looked like she didn't know, so Mu Qiu hurriedly waved her hands away, but the former's expression looked even weirder. After Wei Linger left, Mu Qiu looked at the bag of energy crystal cores in her hand. He picked up a white crystal core, but instead of using his ability to devour it, he used the energy in his body to attract it. Soon, Mu Qiu felt a stream of energy coming out of the crystal core and flowing into his body along his palm. However, this energy was very small, and the effect on his improvement was negligible. Sure enough, Mu Qiu had already known that the energy from absorbing the crystal core was far less than that from directly devouring it. Although the crystal core was the source of the abilities of the infected heretics, the energy contained in it had long been used to transform their bodies. The remaining energy in the crystal core could only be said to be the few potentials hidden in the body. This was like an experience bar. The experience gained by directly devouring the essence of flesh and blood might be dozens of points, but if it was converted into a crystal core and then absorbed, only a few points would remain. Since the crystal core can't improve much strength, I'd better keep it as a currency transaction. Mu Qiu put away the bag and began to look at his own villa. Living alone in a 2-story building seems a bit empty. Mu Qiu walked along the escalator to the floor-to-ceiling window on the second-floor balcony. Mu Qiu looked into the distance and saw the sun gradually setting. He could vaguely see the skyline of the sky. There were a few wisps of smoke drifting in the distance. Below, there were more survivors of the disaster receiving relief in groups. Mu Qiu could vaguely sense that there were several eyes around him spying on the villa, but he ignored these surveillance fish. It's about time to stretch my fists and feet. After saying that, Mu Qiu stretched his waist and secretly activated the power of the monkey spell. Suddenly, a halo flashed in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and gradually enveloped Mu Qiu. In the blink of an eye, the halo dissipated, and a flying bird spread its wings and flew out of the halo, but Mu Qiu's figure disappeared on the spot. Chapter 13, S-Level Heretic Who Hunts Zombies, Fire Demon Lord. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yuhai base, in a tall building, a beautiful and heroic woman in military uniform was flipping through some photos in her hand, and said to Wei Ying beside her. Has the elemental awakener named Mu Qiu joined Linger's team now? Wei Ying looked a little excited, and replied, yes, we have kept the news well hidden before. This awakener is very strong. He defeated the B-level awakener Ma Kuan in the training ground today. This potential may even reach the destructive level in the future. After all, he was the first to discover Mu Qiu, and it was also brought back to the base by his sister. He was also proud to bring back a seed-level awakener to the base. Hearing this news, the uniformed woman did not show a happy expression, but pondered for a moment, looked at a white-haired man on the other side, and said, is there any problem with him? The white-haired man adjusted his black glasses and said, according to observations during this period, this man is quite honest. He has not come out since being sent to his residence by Wei Linger today. He does not carry any communication equipment, and I don't think there is any force willing to send such a potential awakener as a spy. After hearing the analysis of the white-haired man, the uniformed woman nodded and said calmly, continue to observe for a while, and withdraw the manpower after confirming that there is no problem. After all, no matter how rare the elemental system is, it is only a potential stock after all, and has not surpassed the real S level. Even if it can attract a certain amount of attention, it is just that, and this uniformed woman is none other than Xiao Hanyan, one of the three giants of Yuhai base. Xiao Hanyan asked Wei Ying and the white-haired man about some matters, and suddenly seemed to realize something, and said, Wang Depeng will be back soon, right? That when the name Wang Depeng was mentioned, Wei Ying and the white-haired man were also stunned. The white-haired man reluctantly said, Captain Wang has led people to search the ruins for half a month. It is indeed time for him to come back. That lunatic. With a loud bang, Wei Ying, who has always been mature and steady, slapped his palm on the table and said angrily, Colonel, we can no longer tolerate this lunatic allowing his men to disrupt the order of Yuhai. Since the establishment of the Yuhai safety zone, many survivors have been bullied and oppressed by Wang Depeng's men. Every time our people want to control it, they are violently oppressed by Wang Depeng. The Yuhai base has Wang Depeng, a scourge, which is even more dangerous than the zombie heretics outside. Wei Ying complained in front of Xiao Hanyan, but Xiao Hanyan seemed particularly calm, with a pair of handsome eyebrows slightly frowned. After a while, Xiao Hanyan shook her head after thinking for a while and sighed, the Yuhai safe zone has just stabilized. Now is not the time to fight with Wang Depeng. Zhang Dawei is a greedy businessman who will not do anything without profit. He may not stand on our side when the time comes. This damn world. Xiao Hanyan obviously did not want to continue on this topic, and turned to say, how is Miao Miao these days? The white-haired man replied, Miao Miao is still unwilling to communicate with others. We tried to find a few people of the same age to contact her, but the effect is still not ideal. Xiao Hanyan's expression became a little solemn at this time, we must stabilize Miao Miao. The redemption plan is coming, and we can't make any mistakes on our side. At dusk, the sun's outline has gradually dropped below the horizon, a flying bird with its wings spread across the gradually dim sky. Until now, Mu Qiu can get a general view of the entire Yuhai safe zone. The Yuhai safety zone is based on the original Yuhai base, expanding the territory within a certain range around it, with mountains as natural barriers, and in front of it is a thick wall several meters high erected by the awakened using their supernatural powers. It is a bit like the wall barrier in a giant, but much lower than the previous one, barely able to block the attack of ordinary zombies. The flying bird, transformed by Mu Qiu, flapped its wings and flew high, passing through the towering buildings, and finally landed in the ruins of a city hundreds of kilometers away from the Yuhai safety zone. The flying bird landed on the rooftop of a building, a halo flashed, and Mu Qiu, dressed in a black robe, stood on the eaves of the rooftop, looking down from a distance. The cracked earth was devastated, and the streets that had long been reduced to ruins were full of zombies like Walking Dead, who were roaring madly because of hunger. The lifeless and hollow eyes, the mouth that was so wide open that it was dislocated, revealed an endless desire for flesh and blood. The hideous face, the twisted and twitching limbs, and the old blood stains on the clothes conveyed the deepest fear in people's hearts all the time. Night is about to fall. Compared with the scorching sun during the day, the night is the time when these heretics are more active. Looking at the zombies roaring on the ground like beasts, Mu Qiu shook his head. He really didn't want to associate with these zombie-like monsters. Human society is his real destination. A breeze blew, lifting the black windbreaker and swinging it. Mu Qiu stood on the eaves with a calm face, as if the group of terrifying zombies below that frightened ordinary people could not cause any waves in his heart. Suddenly, Mu Qiu bent down and jumped into the air. His figure turned into a residual shadow in the air, as if a black shadow fell from a building more than 10 stories high. The black robe fluttered, and as the blurry black figure continued to fall, Mu Qiu's figure continued to expand in the air. In the blink of an eye, a hideous monster with red skin, muscular body, human body and dragon head appeared in the air. The dragon-headed monster roared, and the huge roar seemed to shake the sky and crack the earth, and then it hit the ground like thunder. A series of loud bangs sounded, like a bolt from the blue, and a huge deep pit was instantly smashed out of the solidified asphalt-paved ground. Countless zombies on the street were attracted by the deafening roar and rumble, and rushed towards the deep pit one after another, but then, a pillar of fire erupted from the deep pit underground, as if the roaring fire dragon had risen from the ground and swallowed the sky and the earth. A group of zombies near the deep pit were directly burned into charcoal slag by the fierce flames. Roar! The roar of a huge bell shocked the world again. After the pillar of fire dissipated, a huge monster with red skin, a dragon head and a human body stood up and roared fiercely, surrounded by corpses. This terrifying monster several feet tall was the Flame Demon Lord transformed by Mu Qiu. Chapter 14: A Hunting Carnival for One Person. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Roar! A loud roar was like a bolt from the blue, and the Flame Demon Lord opened his huge claws and grabbed a zombie on the roadside. Then, the Flame Demon Lord exerted force on his palms and clenched them suddenly. The zombie was instantly crushed by the huge force, and blood splattered in an instant, and blood mist filled the sky. Then, the Flame Demon Lord's monster-like body suddenly jumped out of the pit, and in the blink of an eye, he had flashed to the street where corpses were everywhere. The sharp claws picked up several zombies horizontally, and with a puff, the ground was already stained with large patches of blood. As if stimulated by the blood, the Flame Demon Lord's eyes were full of red, and he opened his bloody mouth, revealing his ferocious fangs, and a ball of deep red flames instantly spurted out of his mouth. Like the dawn, the several-foot-long red flame column instantly devoured everything in front of it, and illuminated the dim street like a long lamp in the lonely night. Looking around, the street was already a wreckage, and the strong smell of blood permeated the entire street. But the strange thing was that the street was surprisingly silent at this moment, leaving only the heavy breathing of the Flame Demon Lord, and the strong smell of blood and burning in the air. The sun that was about to set on the skyline reflected the entire street into the twilight of dusk, and the crimson sunlight mixed with the bloody scene of corpses everywhere, together forming a unique killing scroll for Mu Qiu. The bloody figure of the Flame Demon Lord was reflected in the bloody light curtain, and there were broken corpses and charred bones around him. Shoo! Suddenly, the ground under the Flame Demon Lord's feet suddenly cracked, and a spider-web-like cracked ground wrapped the Flame Demon Lord's huge body and instantly sank deep. The next moment, a giant centipede with a body length of more than 10 meters jumped out from the ground, spewing dark green venom from its mouth, and at the same time, waving its sharp limbs like thunder and stabbing straight at the eyes of the Flame Demon. The red in the eyes of the Flame Demon Lord became even darker red, and his body did not move at all, just raising his arms. With a clang sound, the sharp limbs of the centipede pierced the flesh of the Flame Demon's arm, making a strange sound of metal clashing, but the limbs did not move an inch. At the same time, two beams of fiery red laser light shot out from the Flame Demon Lord's pupils, and directly penetrated the dark green venom sprayed by the giant centipede, and directly shot through the centipede's mouthparts. The giant centipede screamed, and the hooks on both sides of its body began to dance wildly, but the Flame Demon Lord stretched out his red palm and instantly wrapped the centipede's head. His arms exploded like blood mist, and in an instant they condensed into a ball of blood-colored vines, tightly wrapping the centipede's head. The giant centipede began to struggle violently, and the essence in its body was constantly absorbed. Visible blood flowed between the blood-colored vines formed by its arms. In a few breaths, this thick centipede that was several feet long was shrunken and sucked into a withered state. Throwing the mummy in his hand to the ground, the flame demon lord's body swelled, and a groaning sound came out of his mouth. At this moment, the zombies who survived this destructive disaster in the distance felt the terrifying breath emanating from the flame demon lord. They were originally fearless, but now their bodies trembled, and they unconsciously howled, "Roar! Roar!" This is the trembling from the bone marrow of low-end creatures, and they can't help but surrender to the superior. In an apartment in Yuhai safety zone. Asshole. A man with a wretched face and a mustache blushed and smashed the glass on the table in front of him. Hee Ma-kun, today's incident has made you famous in the search team. You were taught a lesson by a newcomer. You are really promising. A man dressed in brilliant clothes and dressed like a gangster leaned against the wall, holding a dagger in his hand and a sarcastic smile on his face. The mustache man was the lizard man Ma-kun who was frozen by Mu Chio's ice power in the afternoon. You know nothing. That Mu Chio is not a simple guy, he is definitely not a novice. Ma-kun's forehead was bulging with blue veins, and his face looked a little ferocious. At the moment of being frozen, I could feel the murderous intent in his eyes. I almost thought I was dead. This is definitely not something that ordinary survivors in the ruins have. Come on. That Mu Chio has already surrendered to the woman Xiao Hanyan. An elemental awakener must be treated like a treasure. The gangster man was playing with a knife, with a disdainful expression. Wait. I must get this place back. Count the days, Boss Wong should be back too. An awakener of the ice element, I believe the boss will be very interested. Ma-kun suddenly laughed, stretched out his tongue to lick his lips, and a gleam of light appeared in his eyes. Late at night, the evening breeze blew through the silent and deserted city ruins, and the night sky was dotted with stars and flashing silver light. A crescent moon was shining in the sky, dimly illuminating Mu Chio, who was sitting on the top of a row of tall buildings. At this time, Mu Chio had already returned to human form, and the clothes on his upper body had burst during the transformation. Mu Chio was seen sitting on the roof of a building more than 10 stories high, with his legs hanging in the air, wearing a black windbreaker, and his naked upper body vaguely revealed his strong abdominal muscles. Wiped the blood off another yellow crystal core in his hand, throw it into the cloth bag full of crystal cores, and cast his eyes on the dense group of zombies below. Low-end zombies have no reason. In the dark night, they are like hungry beasts searching for prey by instinct. The wailing and roaring sounds from their throats from time to time together form a concerto unique to the Walking Dead in this long night. Sure enough, it's too much for me to be with this group of Walking Dead. Looking at the civilized society below that has completely lost its humanity, Mu Chio shook his head. In comparison, the Yuhai safety zone is like a paradise on Earth. I couldn't help but feel a little admiration for the leadership of the Yuhai safety zone, to be able to rebuild the long-lost social order. Even if it is only a short-term construction, this process must be extremely difficult. Tonight's massacre was more like a hunting game for Mu Chio, not only to familiarize himself with the newly acquired abilities and use them flexibly, but also to indulge the dark side of the evil lord in his body. As the saying goes, it is better to drain than to block. After a night of carnival feast, the violent mood of the Fire Lord was obviously eased a lot, and it was quiet without using the suppression ability of the tiger spell. This situation is like a child who goes to bed after eating. After all, I ate dozens of heretics tonight. It should be enough for the fire demon to digest for a while. Mu Chio looked up at the moon, and suddenly felt that the dark world below became a little boring. Standing up, the black robe he was wearing fluttered and fluttered. Mu Chio flew up, stood in the air, looked at the boundary of the Yuhai safety zone in the distance and said, "It's almost time to go back." Chapter 15, After the Apocalypse, The Changing Power of Money. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The first ray of sunlight in the morning shone through the window. Mu Chio slowly opened her eyes and stood up from Simon's thick mattress. Opening the expensive silk curtains, Mu Chio stood in front of the one-person high transparent floor-to-ceiling windows on the second floor of the villa. Outside the windows was bright and warm sunshine. To be honest, this was Mu Qiu's first time living in such a high-end villa. Looking at the wisps of sunshine outside the window, Mu Qiu couldn't help but sigh. At least in terms of maintaining order, the senior officials of the Yuhai safety zone have done their best. From the surface, it is difficult to tell that this is a terrifying apocalypse where zombies are everywhere and heretics are rampant. After the last lesson, Mu Qiu no longer dared to use the sheep talisman's ability to leave the body to spy on the base. After all, his ability is still weak in the soul field. God knows there are other awakened people in the base who are good at the soul field. Ever since she learned that there were 3 destructive level awakeners in the base, Mu Qiu understood the importance of being a low-key human and secretly warned herself not to be so reckless anymore. After taking a short rest, Mu Qiu put on his black trench coat again and walked out of the villa area. Survivors in the safety zone currently have 2 ways of eating. One is the relief food that ordinary people can receive, but this food is usually based on some expired food and rice porridge soup made with wild vegetables and old grains. It is difficult to even have enough food and clothing, let alone any nutrition at all. Awakened ones with some strength will use the crystal nuclei obtained by hunting in the ruins to exchange for some canned hams before the end of the world. This is already a quite luxurious food in the end of the world. Now crystal cores have long replaced the currency before the end of the world. Because of their special functions, they are widely traded in the circle of awakened people. In the world of survivors, just a few white crystal cores are a huge sum of money, enough to make a family. I won't have to worry about food and drink for a few days. The 2-story villa that Wei Linger gave to Mu Qiu belongs to the classic rich area in the Yuhai safe zone, and is basically populated by post-apocalyptic awakened people. The original residents of the villa have either turned into irrational zombies, or transferred the house for a few good meals. This is the change of money and power after the end of the world. The sudden outbreak of the doomsday virus has caused earth-shaking changes in people with different identities in the past. Perhaps in the eyes of some people, this apocalyptic disaster has caused those destined to be ordinary people to embark on the road to becoming kings. When I came to a stall on the roadside, the stall owner was a young man with shabby clothes, dark skin, and a scar on his face. Although he is a bit dusty, he looks strong and full of heaven. It is obvious that he is also an awakened person with supernatural powers. The stalls sell a variety of things, including canned beef found in the ruins, self-heating hot pot, instant noodles, weapons like daggers and knives, and even some brand-name clothes. It was obvious that this awakened person also followed the team to search for resources from the ruins, and then returned to the Jade Sea safe zone to trade goods. Mu Qiu looked through it briefly, picked out food such as ham bread, and took out a dagger. She asked seemingly casually, "Is there a map of the surrounding areas of Yuhai City? It's best to have detailed ones. That kind of thing." The stall owner looked at Mu Qiu in confusion and said, "Hey, buddy, in what age are people still using paper maps? Just tell me where you want to go. I was born and raised in Yuhai before the end of the world. I can remember any large shopping mall or supermarket, Men Qinger." After saying that, he rubbed his fingers again and looked at Mu Qiu. "Of course, this information is not free. What do you think of a white crystal?" Mu Qiu nodded. He didn't want to care about such a trivial matter. He just threw a few white crystal cores over and asked, "Do you know where the Daishiandi Entertainment Club is?" The man smiled happily when he saw Mu Qiu being so generous and took the crystal core. Only then did he hear Mu Qiu's question. He frowned and thought for a moment. Daishiandi Entertainment Club. After a while, he shook his head. "Brother, we were ordinary people before the end of the world. How can we afford a club? But I do know that there are several places specifically for us awakened people to have fun. A few years ago, the women there were all young white-collar models. Their looks and figures are so beautiful. If we didn't touch each other before the end of the world, how could we have a chance to see them? But now, have these noble goddesses become the playthings of us awakened ones?" As he said that, the stall owner's face showed a look of reminiscence and yearning. As he swallowed, something seemed to have appeared in his mind. Mu Qiu coughed lightly, and the stall owner regained his composure. He smiled evilly at Mu Qiu and said, "How about it, brother? Do you want me to take you there to have some fun? It's not much more interesting than finding some entertainment club. Mu Qiu shook her head and refused without hesitation. In this regard, he was still a bit of a germaphobe, but not every woman could catch his eye. A moment later, the young stall owner stared at a handful of white crystal cores in his hand with gleaming eyes, while Mu Qiu's back had already walked far away. It seems that I need to reserve more white crystal cores next time I hunt. Mu Qiu was walking on the street and looked at her empty wallet, feeling helpless. He made a serious mistake. When hunting in the ruins, he only took away the crystal nuclei of B-level heretics and above, but did not even look at the ordinary white crystals. But the most common currency in the safe zone is white crystal, because low-end zombie heretics are easy to deal with. Even stronger survivors can kill a few ordinary zombies with weapons, so it is relatively easy to obtain white crystal. White crystal is produced by ordinary heretics of level C and D. Above white crystal is blue crystal, which is as crystal clear as sapphire. This kind of blue crystal core is relatively precious in the safe zone. It can only be found in heretics above level C, and the output is still probabilistic, recalling that there happened to be a blue crystal in the bag of crystal cores that Wei Linger gave to him. It can be seen that Wei Linger really paid a lot for Mu Qiu. Sitting on a mountain of gold but not daring to take it out, now feel this feeling. Mu Qiu smiled bitterly. He now has a lot of high-level crystal cores in his hands, but once these properties are taken out, it will definitely cause an uproar. If he is asked about the source of the crystal core, it will be a difficult question to explain. After all, his idea is to hide in human society. If his true strength is exposed, he will inevitably go to the front line to do some dangerous tasks. There are still countless hidden dangers in this apocalypse, and he doesn't want to jump out and become cannon fodder just because he has some strength. Chapter 16, Revenge for Every Grievance, Ma Kuan's Frame-Up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While Mu Qiu was thinking, more and more people were walking on both sides of the street, but most of them were survivors and refugees who were in a hurry and looked pale and thin. They had to work to get some food to fill their stomachs. These labors were basically hard work like repairing buildings and carrying goods, and the food they could get in a day was pitifully small. Therefore, many young and middle-aged people flocked to join the guards in the safe zone. The daily tasks of these guards were to maintain the order of the Yuhai base, transport resources collected by the search team, and expel low-level zombie heretics in the surrounding area. However, there were only a few thousand guards to recruit, which was much less than the tens of thousands of people in the base, but the treatment was extremely generous. The salary of a guard was enough to feed a family of 3, and the probability of casualties was much smaller than that of the search team. Exploring the ruins. It was simply a coveted iron rice bowl in the end times. The pedestrians on the street were dusty, but no one was laughing or joking. Instead, they fell into a strange silence. Everyone's face was full of sorrow and confusion about the future. Mu Qiu couldn't help but sigh when he saw this scene. The rich and poor classes are unchanging principles in any era. Now the standard of measurement has only changed from money and power to the strength of the awakened person's supernatural power. Just when Mu Qiu was lamenting the hardships of the world, a survivor passed by him, but in this moment of rubbing shoulders, the survivor suddenly bumped into his shoulder. Mu Qiu subconsciously swung his hand out and hit the man, and the survivor was instantly whipped away. Then he was whipped away at a jaw-dropping speed, and finally hit an abandoned electric pole on the side. The survivors passing by were frightened by this scene, but they heard the person who was whipped away lying on the ground began to wail violently, and his body lying on the ground was shaking constantly. Awakened people hit people. Suddenly, a voice came from somewhere in the crowd, and then similar voices began to rise one after another. This person actually violated the regulations of the safe zone and relied on his identity as an awakened person to commit violence in public. Lawless. Where is Yuhai's law enforcement team? The many survivors who were watching looked at each other, staring at Mu Qiu with anger, fear, envy, and a little pity. You know, Yuhai Safe Zone is one of the few survivor bases that still maintain order in the entire apocalypse, and there is a law enforcement team dedicated to maintaining order. Among the many laws used to maintain order, the most strictly prohibited is that awakened people attack ordinary people without superpowers. There are even cases where awakened people attack ordinary people and eventually the awakened people who attacked were expelled from the base. Everyone looked at the survivor who fell to the ground with sympathy, but no one dared to step forward to ask about the situation, and at the same time, many people looked in the direction of Mu Qiu with the intention of watching the fun. When the law enforcement team arrives, the awakened person will probably suffer. In the crowd, Ma Kuan, who has a mustache and a slightly wretched appearance, is watching the scene in front of him with a sinister smile on his face. All this was planned by him, including the injured survivor and the crowd who were naturally his subordinates. Originally, according to his plan, he wanted his subordinates to have a dispute with Mu Qiu and cause a conflict. If Mu Qiu gave in, the cowardly awakened person would be the easiest to deal with in this doomsday. He has a way to ruin Mu Qiu's reputation the next day and make him unable to survive in the entire safe zone. At that time, even Xiao Hanyan, that woman, can't protect him, but who knew that before his men hit Mu Qiu, he slapped his men several meters away with a slap, which really surprised Ma Kuan. Damn, this kid reacts too quickly, doesn't he? That's good, let's make a big deal and see what this kid will do. Ma Kuan smiled wickedly, and remained calm in the crowd. Mu Qiu, who was surrounded by the crowd, did not react much, but recalled the subconscious reaction of his body when he was hit just now, and immediately felt that something was wrong. Looking at the survivor lying on the ground groaning, he saw that he was breathing in less than breathing out. Has he been plotted against? Several names quickly emerged in Mu Qiu's mind, but there was only one person who he had offended the most since entering the Yuhai base, the lizard man Ma Kuan. Not to mention that he had made his brother disabled for life. He had taught Ma Kuan a lesson that time in the training ground, which completely humiliated this veteran awakener. According to Wei Linger, Ma Kuan and his boss Wang Sanpeng were both vengeful, and he didn't expect the revenge to come so soon, so Mu Qiu ignored the survivor who was lying on the ground and was barely breathing in the eyes of the people around him, and scanned the crowd. Soon, he found Ma Kuan, who had a unique appearance. In the crowd, Ma Kuan was also stunned when he noticed Mu Qiu's indifferent eyes, but he quickly reacted and looked at him with a sneer without fear, as if he was watching the fun. Before Mu Qiu could make any move, there was a sudden noise outside the crowd, and then a corridor appeared in the circle surrounded by the survivors. A team of people wearing dark black uniforms and a blue eagle badge on their chests walked out. The first one was a man in his 30s or 40s, wearing a hat and with a resolute face. Fang Yi led the team to walk in the crowd, and then looked at the survivor lying on the ground, then looked at Mu Qiu, and then looked around and asked, "What happened?" Ma Kuan came forward at some point and whispered in the man's ear, "Captain Li, this is the case. This new awakener is arrogant. Because a survivor accidentally bumped into him, he beat the survivor severely in public. Do you think this despicable awakener who is arrogant because of his superpowers should be detained and taught a lesson?" Ma Kuan was humble and seemed to be very afraid of this Captain Li. It seems that this black-clothed team is the law enforcement team in everyone's mouth. Mu Qiu secretly sensed that the superpowers in Captain Li's body have reached the A level. After hearing Ma Kuan's exaggerated remarks, Captain Li frowned, but did not say anything. He just took the members of the law enforcement team behind him to check the survivors' injuries. After a check, a young man in the team said to the leader, "Captain Li, his waist hit the electric pole directly, and the vertebral bones were broken instantly. Even if the lower body is healed, he will probably have to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair." Hearing this, the survivors watching were all silent. What does half-body disability mean in this cannibalistic apocalypse? Unable to exercise, even the most basic physical work cannot be done, and the most basic daily life probably requires someone to take care of it. Isn't this a direct death sentence for the man lying on the ground? After hearing this, Captain Li glanced at the man on the ground, and immediately walked to Mu Qiu and said, "No matter what happened between you, come with us first." Warm tips: if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Chapter 17: A rare person with healing ability awakened, Liu Qingfei. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Come with us. You can give us a reasonable explanation for what happened. The many survivors who were watching shook their heads and sighed when they saw this scene. A good awakened person should have a bright future. After this incident, his reputation in the Jade Sea safe zone was ruined, but what Mu Qiu said next made everyone present stunned. Mu Qiu's lips opened and closed, and 3 words came out of his mouth without any emotion. "I refuse." As soon as these words came out, everyone present was stunned. This is the law enforcement team in charge of order in the Yuhai security zone, and they speak their mind. It was established specifically to punish the awakened people who violated the order. There were many awakened people who relied on their powerful abilities to try to defy the law enforcement team, but in the end they were either kicked out of the Yuhai base or died. This boy is really courageous. Newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. Ma Kun, standing next to Captain Li, looked at Mu Qiu Gujing's unwavering eyes and couldn't help but feel a little secretly happy. After offending the people from the law enforcement team, this kid really can't survive in Yuhai. Hearing Mu Qiu's plain words, it seemed as if the person who seriously injured the survivor was not him. Captain Li frowned. This is the most difficult situation during mission execution, the awakened rebel against instructions and violate order. Captain Li looked at Mu Qiu with a slightly unkind look. "Young man, everyone makes mistakes sometimes. Having superpowers is not something you can use to be arrogant and domineering. Now you still have a chance to redeem yourself. Since you are a newcomer, the punishment given to you will not be too excessive." Soon, Captain Li stopped talking and stopped persuading. Because he found that Mu Qiu's attention was not on him at all. Mu Qiu looked at Ma Kun behind Captain Li with her deep eyes, and said indifferently, "Is this all your methods? It seems that the lesson I taught you last time was not enough." For a moment, Ma Kun felt like he was being stared at by the bloodthirsty eyes of a ferocious beast, like thorns piercing his back. The feeling of being frozen and about to die that day came back again, and his body froze almost subconsciously. What are you going to do?" Cold sweat broke out on Ma Kun's forehead, but when he remembered that he was surrounded by people from the law enforcement team, he was also a dignified B-level awakened person. "MD, I'm afraid of a new B." After coming back to his senses, Ma Kun summoned up his courage again and smiled darkly at Mu Qiu. "I just accidentally got into your trap last time. What happened? You still want to make gestures with me? It seems that if you don't let a newcomer like you see the power of my seniors, you really don't know how high the sky is." After saying this, Ma Kun's eyes turned red and his skin color gradually turned blue and black. This was the rhythm of transforming into a lizard man. Enough. Captain Li's eyes were so sharp that Ma Kun was so frightened that his beard trembled and he returned to his original shape. He looked at Mu Qiu indifferently and said to the law enforcement team members beside him, "Take him back for interrogation, and send the wounded person to the medical team." Just as Captain Li was giving instructions, there was another burst of noise from the crowd. As soon as Mu Qiu heard Captain Li's order, her eyes turned cold at first, but then she seemed to sense something, and her eyes were attracted to the crowd. "I saw a long-haired beauty wearing blue jeans and a white coat walking in from the surrounding survivors. When I first saw this woman, she had long, glossy black hair and a plump figure. Even if her figure was covered by a white coat, she could still see it clearly. She was holding a bag in her hand, and she seemed to be walking towards her before the end of the world. Urban beauty, but no one will look down upon this beauty in beautiful clothes, because in this apocalypse, there can still be a woman dressed like this, either because she is powerful or she has the support of a powerful awakener behind her." The beautiful woman came to Captain Li, frowned and asked, "Amberly, what's going on?" As soon as Captain Li saw this woman, he hurriedly said, "It turns out to be Dr. Liu. You are here just in time. Come and take a look at this survivor's injuries." When Li Amber saw the beauty in beautiful clothes, he seemed to see a savior and hurriedly explained the situation at the scene briefly. After listening to Li Anbai's words, Dr. Liu first glanced at Mu Qiu, and then quickly rushed to the survivor who collapsed on the ground. He was seen leaning over and bending his knees, and his curvy body curves were clearly visible. The familiar man took out a pair of white gloves from the satchel on his waist, and then began to examine the injured person with a broken lumbar spine. While Dr. Liu was checking, the survivors around him seemed to be alive and began to talk one after another. "It's concubine Liu Qing, Dr. Liu. She is the living bodhisattva of our Yuhai safe zone." Dr. Liu was a doctoral student at Yuhai Medical University before the end of the world, and he has always been a goddess-level figure. "Great, with Dr. Liu here, the injured person should have no problem surviving." Amid the cheers of the crowd, concubine Liu Qing, who was wearing a white coat and was regarded as a goddess by many survivors, did not dare to slack off at all. Fine cold sweat appeared on the snow-white goose neck. Liu Qingfei looked at the waist of the injured person, frowned slightly, and immediately stretched out her white arms. I saw a green bandage appear on the jade hand, and then it turned into a bandage glowing with emerald green light. The green bandage floated and rotated in the air, and under the command of Liu Qingfei's wave of arms, it was directly wrapped around the lumbar spine of the survivor. The fluorescent light began to spread around the waist at a speed visible to the naked eye as the bandage was wrapped around it. The survivor also let out a few faint groans. But anyone with a discerning eye could see that the man's condition was much better than when he was lying on the ground. Soon, after dozens of breaths, the man's condition gradually stabilized, and the emerald green bandage controlled by Liu Qingfei also dissipated in the air. Liu Qingfei's face was pale, and even fine beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. She stood up and said to Li Anbo, "His condition has stabilized temporarily, but he still needs to rest for a while. I will treat him again in a week, and it should be guaranteed that he will be able to walk in the future." "That's great. Dr. Liu is really as rumored. He treats awakened people and ordinary people like us equally. She is so beautiful and kind-hearted. I wonder which boy will be so lucky to marry Dr. Liu in the future." "Don't be wishful thinking. Dr. Liu already has a fiancée, but she got separated from her husband after the end of the world." That the survivors watching were as excited as if the man lying on the ground was their relative, and they all cast admiring eyes on Liu Qingfei. Chapter 18 The Virgin Mary in the End of the World, Mu Qiu's Attack. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Faced with the admiring gazes of the crowd, Liu Qingfei didn't care at all, but walked straight to Mu Qiu. Mu Qiu was also observing Liu Qingfei at this time. Well, with a charming face, elegant temperament, and a proud figure, she must have at least, What really surprised him was that the energy in this woman's body had reached the level of A-level. This was the first time he saw a female awakener with such high energy in Yuhai. This woman's identity is not simple. Just as Mu Qiu was thinking, Liu Qingfei frowned, suddenly pointed at Mu Qiu, and asked, "Do you think this is interesting?" Mu Qiu was stunned. However, Liu Qingfei opened her red lips slightly, and her tone of voice was extremely cold. "As an awakened person with superpowers, if you don't speak for the people, wipe out heretics, and become a peerless hero, you should at least be worthy of your skills and your conscience. You have a great ability, but you use it to bully humans like you, just because he is weaker than you. I have seen too many people like you in this doomsday, selfish, callous. You are proud of bullying the weak, but you are afraid to avoid danger and run faster than anyone else. People like you don't deserve to have superpowers at all." Liu Qingfei's sonorous and powerful scolding resounded throughout the audience. In an instant, everyone fell silent. "Good. Well said." The survivors watching around were instantly aroused by these words that sounded like a sermon. Their expressions were completely different from the numbness just now. Instead, they were indignant and angry. This kind of person doesn't deserve to have superpowers at all. Get out of the Yuhai safe zone. You don't deserve to be here. First, a few people took the lead, and then the emotions of the crowd were instantly ignited, as if to vent the resentment that had been suppressed and accumulated during this period. The overwhelming abuse came towards Mu Qiu like thunder from the plain. When Ma Kun saw this scene, although it was somewhat different from his original plan, the effect was undoubtedly much better. "I didn't expect Liu Qingfei to come at this time, but it just happened to help me. With this woman's help, Mu Qiu's reputation is now completely ruined." Ma Kun wished that Mu Qiu's reputation would be ruined, so that it would be easier to deal with him. Thinking of this, Ma Kun looked at Mu Qiu with a sarcastic smile on his face. Countless abuses and accusations came like a wave. Ordinary people might defend themselves or go crazy when being criticized by thousands of people, but Mu Qiu, who was in the vortex, seemed particularly calm. The power of the tiger spell brought him absolute neutrality and calmness. He. Suddenly, the corners of Mu Qiu's mouth rose, and he smiled strangely. The sound was not loud, but it could be heard clearly by everyone present, stared at by countless hostile eyes around him, and his ears were full of ridicule and abuse. This person could still laugh. Is he really crazy? Everyone was puzzled, even Liu Qingfei. who was the first to bear the brunt, frowned slightly, not understanding the meaning. The noise around him gradually subsided, but Mu Qiu's laughter became more and more intense. In the end, the whole audience was only echoed with Mu Qiu's slightly sarcastic and arrogant laughter. Mu Qiu looked at Liu Qingfei, and there was a little playfulness in his eyes. This kind of stare made Liu Qingfei feel uncomfortable, and she felt a chill in her bones. She had a vague bad premonition. Mu Qiu's laughter stopped. You are right, with power. You can do whatever you want. Suddenly, a cold light flashed in Mu Qiu's eyes. Mu Qiu waved his right arm, and an ice blue streak suddenly shot out from his palm. This gorgeous ice blue streak came like a thunderbolt through the air and hit the injured survivor directly on the ground. In an instant, the man fell into an ice cave, and his whole body was frozen by ice in an instant, and his face still had an inexplicable look of horror. From Mu Qiu shooting out the ice blue beam to the survivor being frozen into ice, the whole process happened in the blink of an eye, and no one present reacted. What are you going to do? That the bad premonition began to expand in her heart. Liu Qingfei stared at Mu Qiu, and for the first time, there was a look of uneasiness and panic in her eyes. Mu Qiu's mouth curled up into a smile, and his messy hair fluttered in the wind, covering his deep eyes. The next second, Mu Qiu's open right palm suddenly closed. Crack! Everyone turned their heads and saw that the ice that froze the survivor seemed to be crushed by some invisible energy, and it was covered with cracks. Suddenly, like a broken mirror, the huge human-shaped ice broke instantly. The ice still had human broken limbs, and scarlet blood was scattered all over the ground as the ice broke, and the head of the survivor was still sealed in an ice block alone, with a horrified look on his face, and his wide pupils were filled with fear and horror. The connection between the neck and the head was still gurgling with blood. Now, who else wants to blame me? Mu Qiu looked indifferent and glanced at the survivors who were watching. Most of the survivors still had a look of fear on their faces, and they had not recovered from the scene just now. The few survivors who had seen big scenes in the end of the world also showed panic when they saw Mu Qiu's horrible killing method. They avoided his sight and dared not say another word. Looking for death. A burst of air-breaking sound came, and Lianhua's feet were like the wind, and he came to Mu Qiu in a few moves. Immediately, Lianhua turned sideways, and the rough palm of the original human turned into an eagle's claw in an instant, stabbing fiercely at Mu Qiu's eyes. Mu Qiu snorted coldly, and also stretched out his palm into a claw. At the moment when Lianhua's eagle claw stabbed at his eyes, he clamped Lianhua's wrist tightly like a branding iron. Lianhua had not yet recovered from Mu Qiu's quick counterattack, and then he felt numbness and coldness on his clamped wrist. He looked down suddenly, and saw that a piece of frost had condensed on his wrist, and it quickly attacked his wrist. Lianhua blurted out, "Elemental Awakener." Before Lianhua could say anything else, the members of the law enforcement team behind him saw that the captain was in danger, and they all took out the pistols on their waists, pulled the trigger, and bullets were shot at Mu Qiu. Seeing this scene, Mu Qiu's eyes were slightly cold, and then he clamped Lianhua's eagle claws with his right hand. At the same time, his left hand stretched out, and a light blue mist emerged from the palm like frost, and in an instant, it solidified into a one-person high ice wall in front of Mu Qiu. The rain of bullets hit the ice wall, but it seemed to hit the iron sheet, and sparks flew in an instant. Occasionally, a few bullets hit the ice wall with deep pits as thick as fingers, but hundreds of bullets could not penetrate this one-person high ice wall. Monster, monster! Seeing the incredible scene in front of him, a survivor finally couldn't help but tremble and said, "Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding." Chapter 19: The Law of the Jungle in the End Times. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The survivors around were all frightened by Mu Qiu's methods, and retreated in panic, fearing that Mu Qiu would go crazy and hurt them. At this moment, Mu Qiu's right palm was still clamping Lianhua's eagle claw, and the cold frost was still spreading along Lianhua's eagle claw toward his arm. Suddenly, Mu Qiu's figure flashed, and in an instant he was in front of Liu Qingfei. Mu Qiu's eyes met with Liu Qingfei's, and he could clearly see the shock and panic in the other's eyes. Mu Qiu suddenly smiled and said, "I think it's very interesting. What about you?" You can hold on to the stupid saintly heart in your heart, but don't dream of imposing it on others. The law of this world is the law of the jungle, and having power can indeed do whatever you want, just like. As he said, Mu Qiu paused. Like this, Mu Qiu spread his right hand, and a blue ice cone suddenly condensed in his palm. Mu Qiu raised his arm high. The next second, the ice cone was thrown out like a thunder missile. Everyone could only vaguely see a slash of ice blue light suddenly flashing in the air, heading straight for Ma Kun. In a split second, Ma Kun had no way to react, and could only watch a blue light not far away continue to expand in his pupils. Not good. The ice cone, which was a hand long, was close to Ma Kun's head before he reacted, and he tried to dodge it with a tilt of his body. At the same time, he subconsciously transformed into the form of a lizard man, with wrinkled skin and a strange purple-blue color. This was already his strongest form, but he still couldn't avoid this swift attack. Ma Kun narrowly avoided the vital point, but his shoulder was still pierced by the sharp ice cone. With a click, the ice cone shattered while piercing Ma Kun's shoulder blade, and at the same time, blood flew in the air. Ma Kun was hit in the shoulder, and he couldn't stand the severe pain and knelt on the ground, covering his shoulder and howling. Mu Qiu glanced at Ma Kun, but shook his head secretly in his heart. His ice elemental ability was still at the B level of the zombie heretic he absorbed. The reason why he could suppress Li Anbua, who was a B level or even A level awakener, was all because of his own powerful strength and rich combat experience when he was transformed into the Flame Demon Lord. But relying on the B level ability alone was still too weak. Even if he had more skills, he seemed a little powerless when facing a high-level awakener. It seems that I have to find a way to improve the level of the ice ability. After thinking about it in his heart, Mu Qiu turned around and looked at Liu Qingfei. Even if she was wearing a white coat, it was still difficult to hide her proud figure. Her long hair was black and shiny, her face was also beautiful and elegant, and she exuded an elegant aura all over her body. See? It's a very simple thing. I have power, so I can play with life at will. This is the greatest truth in this doomsday. If you don't even understand such a simple truth, I really don't know how you survived until today. The plain words were full of sarcasm, like a sharp needle piercing Liu Qingfei's heart. A trace of anger appeared on Liu Qingfei's pale face, and she scolded, I have nothing to say to a cold-blooded and ruthless human like you. Human. Mu Qiu narrowed his eyes slightly, still smiling. He has not been like that for a long time. Then Mu Qiu looked up at Ma Kun, who was kneeling on the ground and wailing with his hands covering his shoulders. He didn't even bother to say anything to such a small character. If Mu Qiu hadn't taken into account his sensitive identity as an awakener, he would have slapped Ma Kun to death long ago. Mu Qiu looked around at the survivors watching the excitement. At this moment, because Mu Qiu's bloody means just now had scared away some people who stayed behind were frightened by Mu Qiu's slightly smiling face and retreated one after another. Although his handsome face was accompanied by a spring breeze-like smile, in the eyes of everyone, he looked like a devil crawling out of the abyss of hell, and they were afraid to avoid him. My great mother, goodbye. Mu Qiu's voice was mixed with a hearty smile, and he walked away with his hands behind his back. Behind him was the body of the survivor that had long been broken into pieces by ice. Liu Qingfei's pretty face turned pale with anger, but she could do nothing about Mu Qiu. Her supernatural power belongs to the healing type and is not offensive. The law enforcement team members next to him did not intend to let him go so easily. Just as they were about to step forward to stop him, they were stopped by a pair of eagle claws. It was Li Anbai. Captain, him. Some members of the law enforcement team who were not used to Mu Qiu's arrogance were puzzled by Li Anbai's behavior. He had never seen such an arrogant awakener in front of the law enforcement team. Li Anbai looked at Mu Qiu's back and said coldly, this kid is not simple. Report it to the higher-ups first. An elemental awakener is still very valuable for the base to cultivate. The premise is, he can obey the command of the base. Li Anbai sighed lightly, looked at the pile of broken bodies under the electric pole not far away, and felt a headache again, said to the law enforcement team members around him, go clean up the bodies. The incident of the elemental awakener openly killing people quickly swept the entire Yuhai safety zone like a wave. The incident caused a lot of ordinary survivors to panic under the fermentation of some people with ulterior motives. They didn't know how long the order in the safe zone could be maintained. Some people even scolded the law enforcement team for their inaction, because they openly protected the other party because he was a rare element awakener. Just when rumors were flying around, Xiao Hanyan also received the news. The man with glasses and white clothes pushed the door open and said to Xiao Hanyan in the office. It has been found out that the survivor killed by Mu Qiu was a gangster before his death, but he was Ma Kun's subordinate. This person often used violence to collect the property of the surrounding survivors. The law enforcement team has taught him a lesson many times, but because he has Ma Kun's support behind him, he still refuses to obey. A map was spread out on the table in front of Xiao Hanyan. Listening to the report of the man with glasses, Xiao Hanyan looked at the marks on the map. Hearing this, Xiao Hanyan raised her head and said, "So, this time it was Ma Kun who was behind this." The man with glasses nodded. It is said that it was Mu Qiu who defeated Ma Kun in the training ground that day. Xiao Hanyan's cold face finally showed a touch of emotion. At this time, you are still stirring up internal strife for your own selfish desires. Do you really want to completely destroy human society and join those zombies? Chapter 20 Xiao Hanyan's reaction, Zhang Qingwei's treasure hunting ability. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Major, should we ask the law enforcement team to teach Ma Kun a lesson? The man with glasses suggested. Xiao Hanyan shook her head. Wang Depeng will be back soon. If we touch his people at this critical moment, who knows how he will react? Besides, Mu Qiu really went too far this time. He disregarded the order in the base and killed people openly. This is also a fact that cannot be ignored. Xiao Hanyan pondered for a moment, and immediately issued an order with her vigorous attitude. Let the law enforcement team strengthen patrols. Absolutely no second awakener will be allowed to injure people. We must do our best to block the spread of this news. Send someone from Ma Kun to remind him that although the base is short of manpower, it is definitely not short of a B-level awakener. Xiao Hanyan's cold face showed no expression, only a cold light flashed in her eyes. Whether he wants to continue to live his good life in the base or survive in the apocalypse outside, it's his choice. And this Mu Qiu. Since he is Ling'er's subordinate, let Ling'er go over and make him behave. In addition, send more people to monitor him. If he does anything that violates the order again, even if he is an elemental awakener with great potential, there is no place for him in the Yuhai base. Xiao Hanyan issued a series of orders, decisive and sharp, which is her usual style. The man with glasses nodded as if he was used to it. Yes. At the same time, in an office in a high-rise building in the center of the Yuhai safety zone, a middle-aged, fat, and wealthy man sat on a mink chair and listened to the rumors brought by his subordinates. This man is another leader in the Yuhai base, Zhang Qingwei, who has the ability to hunt for treasures. Zhang Qingwei was not angry after hearing what Mu Qiu did, but laughed. It seems that this little brother is still very brave. Interesting. I wonder what Wang Depeng's reaction will be when he comes back and finds out that his subordinates have been bullied. After all, he is a destructive elemental awakener. At this time, a subordinate handed a map to Zhang Qingwei. Chairman, this is the map sent by Major Xiao. The next batch of search teams is about to set off. Please mark the location of the resources. Zhang Qingwei did not speak, but closed his eyes after taking the map. I saw his arms suddenly raised, and stretched out his index finger to dip in the ink beside him. A golden halo suddenly appeared on Zhang Qingwei's broad forehead. An invisible aura began to float around Zhang Qingwei's fat body. The subordinates beside him were amazed. This is the powerful ability that Zhang Qingwei used to establish his foundation in the end times. Online novel. Network, Superpower system, treasure hunting. The real power of this ability does not lie in its destructive power, but in its amazing auxiliary ability. Zhang Qingwei can use the ability of treasure hunting to quickly identify the location of the resources he wants to find, and can even accurately locate the specific coordinates on the map. What's more terrifying is that this ability can not only locate the location of food and treasures, but can even locate the coordinates of some zombies and heretical monsters. Of course, this ability consumes more as the level of the target is higher. At least the powerful existence of S level is not something that Zhang Qingwei can perceive at will at present. With this ability, Zhang Qingwei searched for countless resources at the beginning of the end times, and his men also used this ability to avoid danger and turn danger into safety many times. Zhang Qingwei's eyes were closed, but he seemed to see something. His ink-stained fingers were also pulled by an invisible aura, leaving ink marks at several locations on the map. A few minutes later, Zhang Qingwei paused while writing on the map. Zhang Qingwei suddenly opened his eyes and then took his finger back from the map, handing the map to his subordinates. Zhang Qingwei said, "The locations of several A-level heretics that have been discovered have been marked on the map, but we cannot rule out the possibility that these monsters have been active in the past few days." The subordinate nodded and suggested, "Because of the matter of the elemental awakeners, the situation in the base is a bit chaotic. Do you want to use our people to stabilize the situation?" Zhang Qingwei waved his hand. "Xiao Hanyan is enough to deal with this kind of thing. I don't want to get involved. Let Xiao Yatu and Wang Depeng, that lunatic, fight." After receiving the order, the subordinate said, "Chairman, we have recently found several surviving female students around Yuhai University. What do you think?" "Ahem." Zhang Qingwei suddenly coughed twice, his face still looked serious. "Send them to me tonight, I will assign them jobs in the base." Mu Qiu was awakened by a rapid knock on the door. The room where Mu Qiu lived was on the second floor of the villa. The person knocking on the door was able to wake up Mu Qiu on the second floor. This shows how strong the knocker was. Rubbing his sleepy eyes, Mu Qiu slowly opened the door. What came into view was Wei Linger's coquettish figure with her hands on her hips, and an angry look on her pretty face. It looked like a kitten with its fur standing up. Mu Qiu was stunned. If he remembered correctly, the search team's mission should be tomorrow, right? When Wei Linger saw Mu Qiu open the door, she immediately rushed in angrily, showing a pair of sharp little tiger teeth, pointing at Mu Qiu and saying, "Do you know how much trouble you have caused?" After saying that, she found that Mu Qiu was sleepy and looked like he had not woken up yet. "You still have the leisure to sleep here?" Mu Qiu was puzzled, yawned and asked, "What happened?" In fact, he already had a guess in his mind. As expected, Wei Linger said angrily, "You openly killed a survivor today, which caused an uproar among the people in the safe zone. How long has it been since an awakened person dared to openly violate the order in the base? There are even many awakened people who are proposing to drive you out of the base. Today's incident really gave Sister Han Yan a headache. Do you know how much effort it takes to suppress this matter? As your captain, I now have an unshirkable list of responsibilities. Mu Qiu, you are so good, I brought you into Yuhai, and this is how you repay me?" Mu Qiu was stunned by the eldest lady's scolding. "Are you here to ask for punishment?" The next moment, the eldest lady pursed her lips and said angrily, "If you want to kill someone, at least find a secluded place to quietly kill him afterwards. You killed someone openly. Isn't this obviously giving people a reason to talk?" Mu Qiu laughed. It turned out that Wei Linger was angry about this. Wei Linger bared her fangs, gnashing her teeth, looking like she was disappointed with someone. "That's it, Sister Qingfei has specifically reported your situation to the higher-ups. You dared to provoke Sister Qingfei. You really don't know how to live or die. Still the old rules, urged to update one more chapter when you reach 20.